Look, I'm gonna start this video with something that might surprise you. The Las Vegas Raiders offensive line might actually be decent this year. I know. After watching this team get their quarterback demolished for the past couple seasons, that sounds crazy, but hear me out. What's up, buddies? Welcome back. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We cover Raiders here on this channel. Okay, now before we dive deep into this, I want you to drop a comment below and tell me, what position group are you most worried about heading into this season? The offensive line, secondary, or something else entirely? I'm curious to see what you think because honestly, my opinion on this O-line might be more optimistic than yours. So the question is if the Raiders offensive line is actually good enough for Geno Smith to have success this season. And man, that question got me thinking because 2 years ago, I would have laughed at that question. This offensive line was straight up embarrassing. We're talking about having guys like Cody Whitehair starting at guard. And let me tell you something about Cody Whitehair. The dude was absolutely terrible. I have no clue what the front office was thinking signing him as a starter, but it wasn't just Whitehair. We had Thayer Munford expected to start at tackle, and Andre James had completely fallen off a cliff. Those were supposed to be 3 of our 5 starters. 3 guys who had no business being on an NFL field as starters. That's why I kept saying we had one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Some fans didn't want to hear it, but the tape doesn't lie. Fast forward to now, this unit looks completely different. Like, completely different. And I'm not just talking about personnel changes, I'm talking about the entire philosophy and approach to building this line. Let's start with Kolton Miller at left tackle. Now, Miller isn't Penei Sewell, all right? Sewell is just on another level. Elite in both run blocking and pass protection. But Miller? This dude is legitimately one of the best run blockers in the entire NFL. I'm not exaggerating here. When you watch him on tape, whether it's power runs, zone schemes, or outside runs, Miller is absolutely mauling people. He's physically dominant in the run game, and that's exactly what this offense needs. His pass protection still needs work. I'll give you that. But even with those limitations, I'd still put him in the top 10 tackles in the league. Maybe you disagree and say he's more like a top 15. Either way, he's a legitimate starting tackle in this league. Then we move to Dylan Parham at left guard. Now Parham reminds me of guys like Lester Cotton and John Simpson, former Raiders, who took a few years to develop, but eventually found their way. Cotton ended up starting for the Dolphins. Simpson got himself a nice contract with Baltimore. Both guys just needed time to develop. And I think we're seeing that same progression with Parham. The thing is, Parham is moving back to left guard this year after spending time at right guard. I think he's just more comfortable on the left side. Plus, this new scheme should fit his skill set much better. This is year 4 for him, and historically, that's when these types of guards really start to put it together. Now, Jackson Powers-Johnson at center. This is where I might lose some of you. I think this guy is already one of the top 3 centers in the NFL. Yeah, you heard that right. Top 3. I know people will say, how can you say that when he's only started 8 or 9 games? But sometimes you just know when you're watching elite talent. Compare him to Tyler Linderbaum, who everyone calls a top 5 center. Linderbaum gets pushed around by stronger defensive tackles, just like Andre James used to, but Powers-Johnson? Nobody is pushing this dude around. He's strong as hell, he's physical, and his technique is already elite. I honestly think he might be our best offensive player this season. The question mark comes at right guard with Alex Kappa. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not a huge fan of Kappa, based on his recent tape. But here's the thing. We drafted Caleb Rogers in the 3rd round as his replacement. Rogers should be developing into the long-term starter there. And if he's not ready immediately, at least we have options. Right tackle is where things get interesting. DJ Glaze is expected to start, and unlike my feelings about Thayer Munford, I actually think Glaze has legitimate potential. I'm not sold on him yet, but there are things on tape that make me believe he could develop into a franchise-caliber tackle. That's a big difference from where we were with Munford, where I had zero faith. When you look at this line from left to right, we actually have real pieces. Real players who can contribute at a high level. I think we're looking at a top 15 unit this year, which is a massive jump from being bottom 5 the past couple seasons. And next year, with continued development, this could be a top 10 unit. The Athletic actually named the Raiders as one of the winners of this offseason, and a big part of that was the offensive line improvements. Mike Jones wrote about how John Spytek's arrival has completely changed the approach to building this roster. Spytek drafted 2 guards in Rodgers and has completely revamped the philosophy here. But here's where it gets interesting. There might be some tension brewing between Pete Carroll's mindset and Spytek's approach. According to that same article, the Raiders actually wanted Liam Cohen as their head coach over Carroll. Now, I don't know if that's completely accurate, but it would make sense given the different philosophies. Carroll is 73 years old. He's got maybe 3 years left with a 4th-year team option. This dude wants to win a Super Bowl before he retires. That's his legacy play. He wants to spend money, bring in veteran talent, and go all in for a championship run. Spytek, he's the opposite. He's conservative, he's thinking long-term, and he's not about to mortgage the future for a short-term fix. Look at what Howie Roseman does in Philadelphia. He lets good players walk if they want too much money. He makes the tough decisions to keep the team competitive for years, not just for one season. This creates an interesting dynamic. Carroll might want to spend that $40 million in cap space on guys like Jalen Ramsey or Jermaine Pratt to make an immediate Super Bowl push. Spytek probably wants to roll some of that money over and continue building for sustained success. I actually think this tension could be good for the team. Carroll's urgency combined with Spytek's long-term thinking might create the perfect balance. We get the immediate improvements we need while still building for the future. And speaking of immediate improvements, let's talk about the weapons this offense has now. 2 years ago, Jakobi Meyers was arguably our best offensive player. This year, he might be our 3rd best skill position player. That's not a knock on Meyers. That's just showing you how much talent we've added. Ashton Jeanty is getting incredible reviews from everyone who's watched him in OTAs. Jackson Powers-Johnson has been raving about him. Pete Carroll's been talking him up. Even Max Crosby is saying this kid looks special. Now, I know it's just OTAS without pads, but sometimes you can just tell when a player has that special quality. Then you add Brock Bowers, who we drafted last year. And suddenly this offense has legitimate playmakers. Even Trey Tucker is getting buzz as a guy who could take a step forward. When you combine all these weapons with an actual quarterback in Geno Smith, this offense could be really, really good. The offensive line improvements make all of this possible. You can have all the skill position talent in the world, but if your quarterback is getting murdered every play, none of it matters. That's been our problem for years. But there's one major concern I have to address. Christian Wilkins. This situation is getting really worrying. The dude showed up to a charity golf event this week still wearing a walking boot. He's been dealing with this foot issue since last October, and it's been almost 6 weeks since he's practiced with the team. If he can't even walk without a boot 8 months after his initial injury, how is he supposed to play football in 2 months? At this point, I think he needs to just have the surgery and get it over with. Fix the foot properly. Take the time to heal, and maybe he can contribute when the playoffs roll around. The thing is, even without Wilkins, I think this team can make the playoffs. The offensive improvements are that significant. We've got stability at quarterback, a much improved offensive line, legitimate playmakers, and a coaching staff that's a massive upgrade from what we had. And so that's my take on the Raiders' offensive line and where this team stands heading into the season. Drop your thoughts in the comments below.